Welcome to the Introductory Cloud Usage Fundamentals, which is a foundational class for newcomers into the cloud computing paradigm. I am John Efiong of the Department of Computer Science, Wesley University, Ondo. In this tutorial, I'm going to do a brief introduction to the topic, and then we'll assess cloud infrastructure. We'll do an intro into cloud computing as a concept, and then we'll try to answer the question, why do we compute the cloud? We will assess cloud models, and then look at cloud service classes, cloud service providers, and then we'll look at some cloud services. I'll leave you with some useful resources for further studies, and then we'll wrap up the class. Now let's imagine the cloud. Whenever you hear about the cloud in computing, what comes to your mind? What do you think of the cloud? What can you make out of the cloud? What is the cloud meant for? How can we harness the resources in the cloud? These are some of the things we're going to be seeing in this class. You will need to understand that everyone uses the cloud. We use the cloud every day, and we can access the cloud with our mobile devices. Or what do you think? Where do you think your emails are kept? When you save your phone contacts to your mail, where do they go to? These are simple applications or uses of cloud facilities in our day-to-day lives. Now, this is what we call the global cloud computing stack, or the cloud infrastructure, which is made up of 5 layers. At the topmost layer, you have the cloud clients, where users, or that's client users, can access the cloud facilities using their smart devices, like their handsets, like via laptops, desktops, and the rest of them, and also can access using browsers. The second layer is what we call applications and services layer, which is a collection of software applications that are used to access the cloud services. On the fourth layer, we have what we call the platform and storage infrastructure, which is a collection of virtual storage locations, databases, and servers they can use to access cloud services. Then on the fourth layer, we have the compute infrastructure, which is a collection of physical and virtual hardware components of the cloud, like the servers and the VMwares. And then lastly, on the fifth layer, which is the broadest of all the layers, we have the network layer, which is a collection of connections and channels through which users can access the cloud facilities. So what is a cloud infrastructure? It is a collection of hardware and software resources required to support the computing requirements of a cloud computing model. Now, from this simple definition, there are 2 basic things we need to take note of. Number 1, we need to take note of the collection of hardware and software resources. Now, number 2, we need to take note of the cloud computing model. Now, we're going to be looking at these 2 things closely in this class. You need to understand that the resources that we're talking about that are in the cloud, things like servers, like storage, locations, network, and virtualization software. So, the cloud infrastructure also includes an abstraction layer that hides resources at the back end and then logically presents these resources to the user. So you can think of the abstraction layer as a veil that covers or hides technical details from the end users. What that means is that there are some resources that are stored behind the scene. Users don't get to know how these things are stored, where they are stored. You don't even know where they are. But somehow these things are logically presented to the users the way they will need them, the way they can make use of them. So we call that an abstraction. Okay. The users eventually access the resources through what you call the graphical user interfaces, GUIs, or application programming interfaces for programmers. So these are the channels for which you can access the resources that are hidden in the cloud. And that the resources are maintained by cloud service providers, CSPs, or IT departments. You need to take note of cloud service providers because we're going to be talking or we're going to be making references to them in this class. And then these services are delivered to users over a network or the internet. So the internet provides a connection or a channel through which you can access the resources. Now, this is how a cloud computing infrastructure looks like. Now, looking at the cloud, you can find servers like we talked about. You can find virtual desktops. You can find software platforms, applications, storage, and the data themselves. Now, all of these are kept in the cloud or are stored in the cloud. They are stored in data centers in the cloud. And then they can be accessed using internet connections. You can see the arrow pointing from the cloud downward. Now, what it tells you is that you need things like routers, you need switches, you need network equipment, gateways, and all of those things to access the facilities or the services of the cloud using your mobile phones, your printer, your laptops, and whatever smart device that you have to access the cloud facility. So this gives you a broad view of cloud computing infrastructure. So how can we define cloud computing? Cloud computing is a provision of virtual computing resources, majorly data storage spaces and computing power, such that users get to have access to them on demand. On demand means you have access to these facilities or these resources when you need them without direct active human control. So that is what cloud computing concept is. There is a virtual provision of some resources out there, and you access these resources whenever you need them without direct human management of your resources. So you can think of cloud computing as having resources stored in data centers that you can only access over the internet. So the question is, why should we compute the cloud? Why do we need to compute the cloud? Why do we need the cloud? Now, there are 5 essential characteristics that a cloud computing product should satisfy. And I'm going to be looking at those 5 features. Number 1, there must be an on-demand self-service. By this, we mean that you can provision the service you need when you need it without interaction with service providers. You know what that means? You get to use the services that you need without you depending on direct human provision of the services. Number 2, number 2 is broad network access. This means that you can access the cloud services using mobile phones, tablets, laptops, and workstations, okay, over the internet. So it allows a broad connection of devices to the services in the cloud. And now number 3 is that there must be resource pooling. By resource pooling, it means that you can access multiple resources from multiple providers at the same time. And because the cloud pools the computing resources together for your easy access when you need them. So it's like that. So you get to have access to a collection of these services that are scattered all over the places because the cloud pulls them together and they appear as if they are just right there on your device. Number 4 is rapid elasticity. It means that the capabilities for provisioning your service appears unlimited to you, and then you can use any quantity at any time. Yes, that's the way it seems. However, these services are elastically provisioned and released technically by the cloud service providers, the CSPs. And then finally, measured service. How much of resources you use can be monitored, controlled, and reported. This gives transparency for both the provider and the consumer of the utilized service. So you can know how much you have consumed, how much you need to pay, and then the cloud service providers get to know how much services they have rendered over time. So there is a kind of an overview of the services rendered for accountability, for transparency, for both the giver of the services and the user of the services. Now, these are cloud computing models that are basically free cloud computing models. Number one is what we call software as a service (SaaS), which is a collection of applications that are cloud driven. And then number two, we have platform as a service, which we call PaaS, providing platforms. And then lastly, we have infrastructure as a service. Now, shortly, we're going to be looking at briefly what these models represent, what these models do with regards to cloud usage. Number one, infrastructure as a service, IaaS. IaaS have the backend and the hardware components of the cloud. So you have the backend. The backend component is that component where users don't have access to, but they have access to the content of the hardware components. So that's what we call the infrastructure as a service. Examples are listed where you have the multi-socket, the multi-core services, persistent storage and local area network equipment such as switches and routers that we have mentioned earlier. This make up the infrastructure as a service. Now, this is how it works. The IaaS model allows cloud service providers to provide a hardware infrastructure, and then user organizations get to run those infrastructure components for their use over the internet. So it's a two-way thing. There are providers of the hardware infrastructures, and then there are users who get to rent those infrastructures to use. So that is how the IaaS model works. And then for the platform as a service PaaS, the PaaS allows the cloud service providers to provide a platform which is made up of the infrastructure and the development environments for users. And then the user organizations get to rent and build their own software applications on the platform. So you see the way it works. Someone or some persons or some organizations provide the infrastructure and the development environment, making up the platform, and then allows users to rent the platform to build their own, perhaps custom-made applications, as it were. Now, the third one, lastly, here under the models is software as a service SaaS. Now, think of SaaS as an online service where software is hosted and users are allowed access remotely based on subscription plan. So you have software hosted somewhere, and you get to use this software over the internet. Now, this is how it works. It allows the CSPs to have a full control of the cloud and the software, and then users rent the software applications for performing their task. Now, like I prepared this tutorial online using Google Presentation, which is a free cloud-based software as a service hosted by Google. So Google gives me the leeway to prepare my documents, to prepare presentations, and perform other tasks online. So I don't need to install any presentation software on my system. I can do that in the cloud right away in the cloud, and that's what I did here for this presentation. So that is an example of software as a service. Now these are some examples of the services provided by each of the models. For instance, for SaaS, I've mentioned Google. Google Docs have a lot of facilities that one can use to develop whatever documents that one wants to prepare. They also have the Lotus Live, the NetSuite, Salesforce, and many others that make up the SaaS model. And then for the platform as a service model, you have examples like Long Jump, Windows Azure, Role-based, Google App Engines, and many of them. And then for the infrastructure as a service, you have the Amazon Web Services, the Giant, Rockspace, VMware, and many other services that um, that are there in the cloud environment. Now, these are the cloud computing classes. Now, there are three of them. We have the private cloud, with the public cloud, and the hybrid cloud. Now, the hybrid cloud combines the capabilities of the private and the public cloud. Now, shortly, we're going to be looking at how these cloud classes differ from one another. Number one, the private cloud. The private cloud is personal to organizations, and they are used as dedicated services and hosted in private data centers. Think of any firm that has its own dedicated cloud, and now the cloud, the services are hosted and are dedicated to the firm or to the organization, and they are hosted in private data centers. Now that's an example of what a private cloud will look like. And then for public cloud, it is owned by a third-party public CSP. For instance, we have Amazon Web Services, we have the Google Cloud Platform, Oracle Cloud, and many of them. So these ones, like third party, you as a user, you can hire their services and then enjoy what they provide. And then lastly, we have the hybrid cloud. The hybrid cloud combines the functionalities or the abilities of the private and public cloud, like I've said earlier. Now, these are some examples of cloud service providers. These are giants in the business. There are many others that I've not listed here. We have, for instance, the VMware, we have the IBM Cloud, the Amazon Web Services, Oracle Cloud, you have Google Cloud, we have DigitalOcean, we have Hive Solutions, Cloud Sigma, and many other cloud service providers. These are some examples of cloud services. Now, you will expect a cloud provider to allow you perform big data analytics. That's a service that the cloud provider should give. You can also have application integration, augmented reality and virtual reality, cost management, blockchain, business applications, computer engine containers, customer engagement, databases, developer tools, end user computing, game technology, Internet of Things, machine learning, management and governance, media services, migration and transfer, mobile apps development and management, networking and content delivery, quantum technologies, robotics, satellite, security, identity and compliance, storage, and many other services that are provided by these providers. Now, these services I've listed here are the ones provided by the Amazon Web Services. Now, you expect some other cloud service providers to have similar services. Some could be more than this, some could be fewer, depending on what they provide. I will show you shortly some other services provided by another provider, another cloud service provider. Now, these are useful resources for further studies. You want to check out Microsoft Azure, which is the cloud service environments provided by Microsoft Incorporated. We also have the Amazon Web Services. We have the cloud, the Google Cloud Platform. We have the Oracle Cloud, the Cloud Sigma, the VMware, the GoDaddy, DigitalOcean, Hive Solutions, Dev Team, Tech Donuts, and many of them you want to check out. All right. So I'm going to show you a typical. I'm going to show you an example or some other cloud services provided by another platform. So let's check this out. Let's check this out. Now, these are services that are provided by Oracle Cloud. Now, to check out this, you go to oracle.com/cloud, as you can see here, oracle.com.cloud. Now, these are some of the services provided. You can find the compute engine, the storage, you can find networking, connectivity, and edge services, security, identity, and compliance. You can find database management, analytics and big data, management and governance, integration, application development, applied software technologies. So these are services that are provided by the Oracle Cloud. Now, like I've said, other cloud service providers will have their own services that you might want to use. So you might want to check out the links which I've shown here for reference. All right. Conclusion. In this class, we've looked at the fact that the cloud is an everyday facility accessed through browsers and smart devices. We also stated that the cloud infrastructure is made up of hardware and software components, like we saw in the cloud infrastructure or the cloud stack. And then we've also indicated, we've also shown that cloud computing provides self-on-demand secured services to users, aside other functionalities you expect a cloud service to offer. And then the cloud infrastructure stack is made up of 5 layers, which we have presented. We've also tried to answer the question why we compute the cloud, and that the computation of cloud is done because of its 5 essential characteristics. And then we presented the free cloud models, which are the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And then we've also presented cloud service classes to include the private, public, and hybrid clouds. And then I've shown you some cloud service providers like Amazon, Oracle, Microsoft, Google, etc. And then I've shown you some cloud services like applications development, machine learning, big data analytics, databases, storage, media management, etc. So, and finally, have given you some links for future studies. Thank you for listening. Thank you for attending the class. If you have questions, drop them on the comment box or send us an email for response. Thank you.